All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome again to FCI Live. We are in the second to last day of 2-week series of FCI Live. And today's session is all about accepting grants and gifts as a startup. We're really pleased and honored to have Cooperative Development Services here with us today to talk a little bit about that, how to do so. So we'll be getting right into that in a moment. For those of you who are new to FCI, I am Faye Mack. I'm the Executive Director of Food Co-op Initiative, and we are a national nonprofit organization who are wholly committed to you all. Our mission and purpose is to help communities who are trying to start food co-ops do so with success. And we provide a host of resources and educational materials from the guidebook on how to start food co-ops to interactive programming like this FCI Live series. And we co-host the only national conference wholly dedicated to startup food cooperators, up and coming conference. So we're happy to have you all here and in this community with us. Great. So before I turn it over to the CDS team, I also want to just take a moment to thank our champion sponsors. We have a whole host of really great sponsors this year, including Kalyla and National Cooperative Grocers as our champion sponsors. They help make this event possible and help keep it available and free for all to see. Thank you to them. And with that, just a reminder before we kick it off that if you have questions, feel free to add them in the chat and we'll have ample time for Q&A as we move forward. And with that, I am going to turn it over to the CDS team. Welcome, you all.
Thank you very much. Did that properly load? Is that looking good, folks? On perfect. Thank you much.
Great.
So my name is Kevin Edberg. I'm the Executive Director of Cooperative Development Services. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Vicky Chaput and Kalyla Chaput. And all three of us will be available to answer questions both at the end of the presentation and then for about 10 minutes after. Just echoing Faye, feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll go from there. So Vicky plays an important role. She manages the entire program and would be your primary source of contact if you choose to engage with us during this work. Kalyla is our administrative assistant who supports the program, and she also is a face and a voice that you might well get to hear. You won't likely hear from me very often unless we've got something else going on, but mostly it's Vicky and Kalyla, and they are awesome people who have been doing a great job with this program. So I want to start with just a little bit of introduction. Cooperative Development Services was created by the cooperative community of Wisconsin back in the 1980s. And so we're a 39-year-old 501c6 nonprofit. At that time, they thought that this was going to be like a chamber of commerce for co-ops. And so they applied for a designation as a nonprofit, kind of like a trade association or a chamber of commerce, a 501c6. But when the organization was formed, they explicitly authorized the board of directors to also apply for and create a second entity, which would be a charitable nonprofit, and that would be exempt under Section 501c3 of the federal tax code. Almost all of the activity that we're going to talk about today is that distinction is important because we're going to be talking about how we use the charitable aspect of a 501c3 to support food co-ops and other co-ops in advancing their projects. But in our situation, it's one corporate entity, Cooperative Development Services, Inc. We hold the entire portion of the Cooperative Development Fund of CDS, or the fund. It's all one board of directors and same management for both organizations. And I just went too far. So our organization has a very long history in supporting grocery co-ops. I mentioned that we were started in 1986. In 1991, a really important thing happened, and that was that Bill Gessner affiliated with our organization. Bill is a legend in the co-op community, particularly in the food co-op community. He started as just kind of a lone guy who was working with co-ops, but as he met with co-ops, he found other needs, and he started building a team of consultants inside of Cooperative Development Services who could meet needs of co-ops all over the country. That team has done some amazing things. If you're an existing co-op, you likely know about Common Cooperative Financial Statements, or COCOFIST. That was a creation of our team. The reinvention of national co-op brochures, particularly as a trade association that is powered by a purchasing co-op, was guided by our organization in the early 2000s. In 2006, Mark Goring brought the concept of the Cooperative Business Leadership Development, or CBuild program, and that too rolled out through our organization. In 2008, what Bill started back in 1991 spun out with our mutual blessings. That group of consultants was growing faster than the rest of the nonprofit, so we spun them out as their own consulting co-op, CDS Consulting Co-op. At the time, they later rebranded to Colluminate. So all of that work has its roots and origins in our organization. Since in the early 2000s, we started noticing lots of inquiries from people wanting to start food co-ops. It was almost exactly 20 years ago. I was on the phone with Marilyn Scholl, and Marilyn, are you noticing an uptick in inquiries? Yes. What's going on with that? And so we began looking at the process of how do we guide and support the startups in their process. Out of that came the 4 cornerstones and 3 stages of development. That is one of the things that I personally worked on along with members of the team. We tested that. CDS hired Stuart Reed as our consultant to test that for 2 years. And after that successful test, we and a bunch of other partners said this work deserves its own organization. And out of that was born Food Co-op Initiative. And I am so proud and pleased to see the work that Faye and JQ and everybody with FCI has done to advance this whole concept. But we had a hand in starting all of that as well. Even after the spinoff of our consulting co-op, we ended up also supporting small rural co-ops through a program called Small and Strong. And then more recently, we've innovated in this space with fiscal sponsorship, which is the topic of our conversation today. So when we think about capitalizing cooperatives, I want to make clear, member equity is absolutely critical to the financial success of any co-op. Members who believe and want the services of their co-op, they invest to create it. And so they bring their member equity as preferred shares or member loans. All of that is critical because that is one of the primary things that is used to leverage bank debt. So when you go to lenders, they're going to ask how much member equity do you have? And the amount that you can borrow is directly tied to how much equity you can bring into the conversation. These are the 2 major forces that have been at work in food co-op startups for forever. Most recently, this role of fiscal sponsorship has emerged as a way of bringing charitable capital into the food co-op startup space. And when I talk about charitable capital, I'm talking about individual charitable contributions as well as foundation grants. Through our program, we've gained experience with this. We have approximately 30 memoranda of understandings in place with about, like I said, 30 clients right now. Of them, 18 actively used that program in 2023. And over the last 2 years, they have collectively received or invested from via charitable contributions and grants over $2.5 million to support their projects. So this can be a meaningful strand of income. We have one client that when we are all said and done, we're still in the middle of it, they will have generated over $1 million toward their specific project and their specific build. So this can be a meaningful source of capital for your co-op. But I want to be clear, this is not a substitute for member equity and the proper relationships with your lenders. So how does it work? The Cooperative Development Fund of CDS, the fund, is registered in the 41 states that require charitable registration. This gives us the official permission to solicit and to receive charitable capital in all of those states. And we use those contributions to achieve our mission, which is to start and grow a cooperative enterprise. Now, when we talk about fiscal sponsorship, what we're doing is not all that different from a lot of other ways that we are familiar with nonprofit operations. Many of us make charitable contributions to churches and synagogues or to schools or any number of other organizations that are doing good things in their communities. In many cases, our contributions are used by those organizations. They hire staff, they build buildings, they run programs. They use those contributions directly to meet their individual missions. In fiscal sponsorship, there's a slight twist. In this setting, the nonprofit uses the powers and authorities of being a 501c3 charitable nonprofit to sponsor a client or a project or an activity that is aligned with their mission, and they are allowed to apply for, to receive charitable capital and make that available to support those projects. And that's what fiscal sponsorship looks like. To the best of my knowledge, we are the only organization, the only nonprofit that is specializing in bringing charitable capital into cooperative development on a national basis. I want to make a distinction here. It is entirely possible for nonprofits, typically within the states where they are located, where they are domiciled, to also provide this service. And there are other organizations that do that for projects in their state. You might be one of those folks. And if so, you don't need to come to CDS. You can seek out other nonprofits that have this ability, but most of those folks are functioning in their state of origin. So if you can do that, by all means, be looking and on the lookout and try and be in relationship with organizations in your community or in your state that can offer this program as well. But the unique aspect for us is that we're able to do this on a national basis. So how does it work? The first thing is we enter into a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, with each client prior to the onset of any kind of activities. We are providing the tool, the sponsorship component. Our clients need to provide the fundraising capacity. Our organization does not know your community. We don't know the particular needs and capacities that are present inside of your community. It doesn't make sense for us to try and be direct fundraisers with you. So what we encourage and support you in doing is to create a process, a campaign, where you identify what your targets are and how you want to go about attracting charitable capital for your work. And we provide the mechanism for turning that into resources for your work. So in this kind of a situation, you are responsible for identifying donors, making people aware of the capacity to support your project through charitable contributions. They make their donation to the fund. In return, they receive a tax acknowledgement that they can use for capturing any tax benefits from charitable donations. We assess an administrative fee on those donations when they come in. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. There are no upfront application fees. There's no other processing. It's only when you receive funding that comes through us. We take an administrative fee. That's how we fund our work. The remaining balance of, after we've taken our admin fee, the remaining balance is placed in an account with your name on it and being held in a credit union. I think most of you probably know that credit unions are also co-ops, financial services cooperatives. So we try and support that element. We do our business only with credit unions and only with National Credit Union Administration insured credit unions. So folks build up assets inside of their accounts, and then they pay those out. When they're ready to spend money, they let us know what they want to spend money on, and we release the funds as reimbursement. Let me say a couple more words about that MOU. The MOU is a legal document. It creates the relationship between the fund and the client. Importantly for you, the existence of the MOU establishes our obligation to honor donor intent and to make sure that anybody who intends to donate and support your project and gives to us, we have a duty to make sure that those funds remain available to you. So that's an important aspect of having the MOU in place. It also describes the fees, and it describes the eligible uses of funds. Generally, especially with a startup, but also with existing co-ops, there will be a stated, when you create the relationship with us, you'll do an intake form, and in that process, you'll say, this is what we're trying to do. We will have a time on that MOU. Generally, we will give you 1 year after the estimated completion of your project, and we can renew that if necessary. But we generally will say, okay, if you're a startup, we will keep this relationship in place for 1 year after you enter commerce. So that's a kind of a time frame. If we need to extend that, we're open to that conversation. We've done that many times, but generally that's what we're looking at for a time frame. So how does this all work? For some of you who are at the very beginning of your process, you're still in the early membership development phase, you are perfectly welcome to establish a relationship for charitable fiscal sponsorship. This can happen anytime during your relationship process or during your development process. We welcome you whenever you are ready and wanting to create that. As you develop, you're probably going to do a capital campaign. That's to try and bring in member equity. This program can run alongside of your capital campaign. But there are a couple of distinctions that I want to point out. When you do an equity drive, when you're trying to generate preferred shares or member loans, it's not uncommon for co-ops to hire an individual to create and coordinate that work on your behalf. That's totally fine and permitted because equity drives are governed under generally, if you were at the federal level, it's the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. If you were in a state, it's generally your Commerce Department that would regulate equity investment, and that would be the regulatory structure. But charitable contributions are regulated differently. So professional fundraisers are okay in equity drives, but we do not allow professional fundraisers to run charitable contributions. And the reason for that is that many states, they are aware of folks out there who are mostly fundraising machines. I like my local police department, but I receive phone calls from the Sheriff's Benevolent Commission or people that want to raise money to support. And we find out later that 95% of the money that they raise went to the fundraiser and only 5% went to the mission. All right, that's the work of professional fundraisers in that setting sometimes. And states regulate that. So we do not want to trip into those situations. So we do not allow professional fundraisers to participate in charitable giving campaigns. What we encourage you to do is, if you find potential members of your community who want to support your project and find that a charitable contribution is the best strategy, send them. You can surface them in your equity drives, but send them to a volunteer, a non-professional fundraiser, who can talk them through this process, connect them with us. That keeps everybody safe and clean, and it keeps us out of the messes of state charitable regulation. The program that we have receives cash from a number of sources. We can accept them by check, online credit card. We can receive donations of publicly traded stock. For those of us who are old enough and have 401ks that have required minimum distributions, we can satisfy those requirements through charitable contributions as well. There's a vast array of sources of capital, and some of those might be would be things like donor advised funds, or DAFs. Some employers will match individual charitable contributions. We have set up, Vicky has set up a process to work with a number of those. So all of those are potential sources of charitable capital. Foundation grants are a whole nother game. So if you have a community foundation, those often are good places. They will want to give to a nonprofit. They are almost always familiar with fiscal sponsorship and totally okay with it. So these are all places in your community where there might be capital for your project. The fees that we charge in our program for individual charitable contributions or the contributions of publicly traded stock, 10%. For foundation grants, 5%. And often in cases of severe hardship or in cases of disaster, we waive the fees entirely. We have two housing co-ops that were affected by forest fires and have waived the fees to support contributions that will help them get back on their feet. So that kind of a situation exists. We're open to a conversation on that. So how might you use the cash that you have and that's accumulated inside of your accounts? We take a very broad view of what kinds of eligible purposes. So things like the salaries of your project organizer or of your GM or any other staff. Could be inventory, filling your shelves, paying your consultant fees, invoices, etc. All of those are eligible expenses, and this is all spelled out in the MOU. In these situations, you pay the bill, you say, hey, we want to draw on our cash. You send us the receipts or the paid invoice, we send you a check to reimburse you for it, draw those out of your account. So it's a pretty simple and straightforward process, usually works very smoothly and relatively quickly. I do want to mention one exception. We do not currently allow donated funds to be used to purchase land or buildings or equipment that has a lifespan of more than 3 years. The reason for that, our current interpretation and understanding, is that if we were to use charitable resources to purchase a building, for example, we then take on obligations. If there's asbestos in the building, we have some obligations there. If the project goes belly up, I don't want to have to come into your store and try and haggle over how do we disassemble and take out the freezer or the cooler that we helped you buy. So right now we are not permitting our purchases, our charitable capital to be used for these purposes. Hopefully the other things that we do allow are more than sufficient. We are seeking some legal guidance to see if there are some other workarounds or some other ways of approaching this question of land, buildings, and capital equipment. Don't have an answer on that yet. If that changes, we'll incorporate that into the MOU. We know that that's of interest to folks like you. So we're trying to see what we can do, but at this point, we don't have a favorable answer on that at the moment. So who can participate in this program? Startup co-ops are the main group that are currently using the program, folks like you. But we also will work with existing cooperatives, especially those that are planning expansions or relocations and expansions, or in some cases, a turnaround. We have had experience in all of those situations, and these are all perfectly appropriate uses for charitable capital. They can it can be located in any US state. We've had a couple folks actually ask about, can we accept contributions from Canada? Haven't gotten to that, we haven't figured that one out yet. US contributions, please. And all of this needs to be governed inside of an active memorandum of understanding. That's what it takes. If you are interested in exploring this further, how would you start? You'd contact Vicky. Vicky is going to be the point person. Ask her for our intake form and our set of FAQs. Both of those are information that an individual can take back to your steering committee or your board. It's not uncommon for us to receive questions. You know, you bring it to a board and somebody says, hey, what about ... Totally fine. We're happy to answer all of those questions. We want to be transparent and open, and that's not an issue. You take the time you need to be comfortable that this is a right step for you, but start with Vicky. You'll get an intake form. We're asking, it's a screening tool on our part to try and figure out what kind of a project are you working? Are there any issues that we foresee? Presumably that will lead to you getting a memorandum of understanding for your consideration and action. And at that point, you're off to the races. You can plan your charitable campaign to identify what your goals are, who you might seek it from, all that kind of good stuff. Sometimes we get asked the question, oh, this sounds like a really good gig. How do we make sure that you're holding our money for us? So happy to answer that question too. Number one, to reiterate, the signed MOU is a piece of protection for you. Now, it protects us in some other ways, but it particularly establishes that obligation on our part to honor donor intent, that if you have a donor that sends us money and it says, this is for the co-op in my community, that is donor intent and we need to honor that. So we process it, we put it in an account with your name. Typically with active accounts, there's a monthly reconciliation process. So you get a report. Here's here's the activity, the balances in your account. We ourselves are independently audited every year. We also file our 990s. That's the IRS tax form for nonprofits. And we post both of those on our website. You're welcome to go to our website and check those out. There are independent nonprofit rating agencies. Candid is one of them. We currently hold silver status with Candid. Charity Navigator is another one. They rate us as a 4-star charity, and that's the best that they offer. So those are some of those ways of verifying that we're on the up and up. And as I said, we work only with NCUA insured credit unions. So another form of security for your work. All right. So I have gone through what that process looks like, and I will not be at all surprised if there aren't questions. So let me stop there. And Vicky, have you been monitoring questions? Do we have anything that folks have asked so far? We'll go through the written questions first, then we'll take a mixture of whatever live or ongoing chat questions come in. Vicky.
Yep. So right now, the one question that has come in is, will it cost the co-op anything to sign up with CDS, or are all costs withdrawn via the percentage deducted from the donations?
The latter. all costs
Yep.
come from at the time of donation. We take the admin fee. That's the only money that we take. Are there other questions?
Is it possible to interface a GoFundMe campaign with a fiscal sponsorship arrangement?
That's a good question. I'm sure it's possible. So a GoFundMe campaign generally is not tax deductible. The big picture is any of us can make a contribution to an organization for almost anything. But if you want to receive a tax benefit, if you want to use it as a tax deductible contribution, those contributions need to be made to 501c3 organizations such as the fund. My understanding is that GoFundMe pages are generally for folks who don't care about charitable contributions. And if you want to run one of those by yourself, that's fine. Totally okay. It's not our role to tell you how you need to capitalize your co-op, what things you need to do inside your community. I would say that for folks who make larger capital contributions, larger donations, generally those folks are looking for a tax advantage. They're looking for that ability to make it tax deductible. So I think you would want to pair the work, and I'm going to guess that most of the GoFundMe kinds of contributions would be relatively small dollar amounts, but that's totally fine. The larger ones will come from people who are interested in generally more interested in the tax deductibility aspect of the conversation. So can do both. We won't get involved in your GoFundMe activity. We try and stick to our knitting. So we'll leave the coordination to you and how you want to communicate that and message that in your community, but entirely up to you. Have we exhausted the questions in the chat?
Right now, it looks like it.
All right. So is there anybody that wants to come off mute to ask a question or to explore a topic? And I can't see everybody, so I'm going to perhaps raise your hand and we can identify and move around.
Can I ask a follow-up to that last one?
Sure.
Which was, I think, and I just want to make sure everyone here is aware that if they run the GoFundMe themselves and accept those donations as a food co-op, that will be taxable income. Is that correct?
That sounds correct to me. I'm not an expert on GoFundMes, but basically once my understanding, so I need to give the proper disclaimer. I'm not a CPA. You should not count on me for giving you tax advice. But once you incorporate your enterprise, your income becomes taxable, and you need to file tax returns on an annual basis with the IRS. Now, you may or may not have much tax liability, but you have to be filing those tax returns. A distinction with charitable contributions is because the contributions come to us, a 501c3, that those contributions do not enter your books at that time. They only enter your books when you ask for a reimbursement. And part of the reason that we use the reimbursement process is you have an expenditure. You paid the bill in the first place. So let's say you paid a bill for $100. You send us the paid invoice or the receipt. We send you a check for $100. You've had $100 of income and $100 of expense. They net against each other to zero. So you have no tax liability incurred in that process. We try and be thoughtful, particularly at the end of a year, end of a calendar year, that we aren't moving money in a way that might create kind of phantom tax obligations. Well, they're real obligations. They just, it's based on their timing of when that occurs. So in general, our process results in the capacity for you to receive funding and it not creating tax liability for you. JQ, did I answer the question or did I dance around something?
No, that was exactly it. Thank you. That was my understanding, is that there is a tax advantage to doing it this way, and it's absolutely okay to do GoFundMe's. We have startups that have done them, but they do have to collect that as taxable income almost immediately, and just be aware of that.
A new one. Does CDF provide an online portal that our co-op could link to through a capital campaign fundraising page?
Yes, we have a standard portal that comes in. There is an opportunity for individuals to identify your co-op and to use that as a place where they want their donation to go. It is operated through a third-party venue called GiveMin or GiveMN. They have built the technology and all the backroom support systems to issue tax acknowledgements and all those necessary communications. So there are some additional fees in doing that, but we do maintain that through that third party. We don't operate it ourselves. Vicky, you're more familiar with that. Would you like to say anything more about that part of the process?
Yes, and so I do want to clarify right now, through the online portal, that is for those that want to contribute through like a credit card or PayPal account or something like that. If they are donating via check or through a DAF or something like that, that is different. However, through the GiveMN, we have individual where they are designating which organization, like which co-op they are wanting those funds to go to, and that can be selected there. We are working on one step further where through the GiveMN, there could be a page for your co-op that you could just link on. But I want to be clear that is only for online donations. If it's these other types, that is a completely different situation. And what most cooperatives do is have that on their own website, that information on their own website. Online, we can do that portal. Does that make sense, or did that raise more questions? Perfect. And there are two things I'd like to note really quick. Kevin went through the different types of the different means of the fiscal sponsorship and its advantages. One that we have found to be very interesting, and we want you to kind of think through this. There are a lot of organizations in your communities that match employee donations. And that is something that wasn't even on our radar when we started this. We have found that there is, if you put that out there for your group to know, for your customers and members to know, quite often that is one of the benefits of having this fiscal sponsorship, is then we can work with that organization. And sometimes it's just, yes, we received this donation from your member and we respond to that. Others, we have to apply and give them some information about us. But that is something that we can do. And there are some that match more than one or two times that member's donation. So that is another avenue to think about. And DAFs, it opens up a door for members in your community that in a way kind of are sitting on funds that they want it to be something personal that they relate to, these donor advised funds. And we are finding that having a startup co-op or working with a food co-op in their community is something that they really find interest in donating, and sometimes more than they would typically give. So these are two means, that kind of doors that have been opened through this fiscal sponsorship that we have found works really well for our startups. So just kind of want to mention that sometimes we didn't realize the significance until we started working through that, and it has been a very significant piece of the fundraising model.
I was pausing because I didn't want to butt in too much again. But
Sure.
real quick, if I may share that one thing that we've seen consistently, there absolutely are other orgs that can do this, as you pointed out. And the most common problem that startups have run into working with smaller nonprofits within their states is that alignment in what they'll let them spend it on, because it has to align with the specific values of what that specific organization is doing. So we've had several startups that have used a local fiscal sponsor, and then when they go to spend, they have found their limitations they did not expect that have been major issues. So I just wanted to point that out, and if any response you guys have to that, like, make sure you're thinking that through when deciding. The other one is sometimes the fees are lower, but what they find is the org has no and is well intentioned in every way, but has no experience doing this. And there's all sorts of just things being tracked right and getting checks when they need them. That it's not, that if there are orgs that have to have a lot of experience doing fiscal sponsorship, or we've seen a lot of holdups and challenges. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to speak to any of that, and also just let the listeners know those are the most common issues we've seen working with local organizations to do this.
Yeah, let me thank you, JQ.
Yep.
So the issue of mission is really, really important. So any 501c3 charitable nonprofit can use fiscal sponsorship, but it has to be related to their mission. The project or activity that they are sponsoring needs to be inside of some type of reasonable interpretation of what their mission is. And we find, similar to what JQ was just describing, that many times a local animal welfare group, for example, might they come, hey, can we use them? Well, ask them if this fits inside, if sponsoring a grocery store fits inside of their mission. And that's the kind of rub. We try and because our mission is specific to cooperatives, we don't have that issue, and that's by design. So that's very true. A second other twist that we get on that question has to do with, well, should we start our own foundation? Should we start our own nonprofit? No. All right. Being the person responsible for one, there is a ton of obligation. It's a diversion of first of all, it's a diversion of your energy and focus. You need to be focusing your energy on building your community, generating enthusiasm, generating membership, the desire to use the services of this business. That's 2 full-time jobs right there. All right. Focusing on getting the grocery store operating is mission 1. To divert that and think that, oh, well, we could go ahead and start our own. Well, it's possible. I'm just saying that the cost benefit is way negative on that. And you should look to partner with somebody who is equipped to provide that. Now, whether that's a local nonprofit in your community, somebody in your state, totally fine. But work with somebody who has that capacity, because there are all of those issues that JQ is referring to. And we clearly do not encourage it. It's not that you can't, it's that you shouldn't divert your energy into forming a nonprofit, because it's just one more thing to try and stand up and operate. And it just complicates the process. So let's take a couple of more questions, and then I can riff for a couple of minutes on grants and foundations. But I see a couple more questions.
Yep. The one, just to go off of what you just talked about, Kevin, one response was, we have a local food hut that is our fiscal sponsor. And yes, there has been many issues. So I also want to note, I think we've had 2 fiscal sponsors that have asked, like, if it is okay to move funds from one to another. We've worked with 2 so far that were eligible to move over to us, and then we can have those requests come in for reimbursement. So we know of 2 others that have had those issues. The first question, Kevin, are capital campaign donations taxable? I'll hit that one first.
So again, I can't offer you advice. I think if they come in as, and JQ, I'll throw, well, I'm going to guess you get some of that. I don't think that investments are taxable income if they are noted as investments, that's capital gains and treated separately on the books and so forth. And so they are clearly assets of your organization. But I would be delighted to defer to a CPA in the room or somebody who has answered that question directly. Jakey, do you have any wisdom on that?
I'm curious, if you mean loans, if you mean investments, yeah, that's one thing. I think a lot of startups are doing their capital campaigns now as part donation and part loans. So I kind of almost want to clarify, if you mean donations that come in through your overarching capital campaign, well, everything that's been said here applies. If you mean actual investments in shares or loans, my understanding is no, is I consistently heard no from any accountants that we've worked with.
Let me see, was there any other questions here that I missed?
So I see one from Peter. It's a comment that local fiscal sponsors often don't hold funds for you and only issue as reimbursement for an expense. And so they often distribute the funds as soon as they're received, making that income potentially taxable to the co-op unless expensed before the fiscal year. So that's exactly the kind of conversation that we had a moment ago. When we receive those funds, we take the admin fee, and the whole balance is then put on account for you and is held available for your project. And only the tax issue only becomes an issue when you are ready to withdraw funds from your account. Then we need to we desire to have offsetting revenues and expenses to manage your liabilities. So the local folks, those would be questions for you to ask if you're seeking to work with somebody else.
And JQ kind of noted this. I won't read this one out loud, but I do want to say as well, when we are working with somebody who is asking about our fiscal sponsorship, and if they do have something in their community that would really seem to be a fit, we quite often would encourage that as well, because that is a relationship that they are maintaining over many years. And always working within your communities is a very good thing. So even though there have been issues and we've been there to be able to support the co-ops that have, we do know of others that it works very well. And we go out of our way to make sure that we're the correct fit all the way across the board, and don't discourage you from using a resource within your community. So just want to make that statement.
Thank you.
Kevin, I think that's all I see.
Let me take a couple more minutes. I think I've got, do I have 1 minute, 2 minutes, Faye? All right. So
Yeah,
let me talk about grants. We have found that community foundations are excellent sources of support for startups in their community. They want to leverage those relationships and capital within the community to support your efforts, but they typically have rules that say their gifts can only be used to other nonprofits. So there are restrictions on how they manage their funds, and that's where a relationship with us facilitates that. It makes it easier. Generally, when they find out that we are a recognized 501c3, they'll do some due diligence. That process has gone very, very smoothly. We leave it to you to create those relationships. If there's reporting issues, we leave it to you as well. But the relationship between the community foundation or the other foundations and our fund generally goes very, very smoothly. Once they check, everybody checks each other out, life is good.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Are there any final questions before we start to wrap up? Okay, well, I just want to thank Kevin and Vicky and Kalyla so much. This was super informative. It's one of those really nitty-gritty topics that we really, folks really need to dive into. So thank you so much. And for launching this service. It's really huge, going to be huge for startups. So thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody for coming and asking your great questions. Before you leave, there is, as I mentioned before, we have a very short little survey that we would love for you to take. It really helps us. So we run FCI Live annually. We run all sorts of other educational sessions and help think about the content for up and coming. And so getting feedback about what works for you all, what you need, what you want, really helps us make our programming better. So thank you for taking a moment to fill out that survey. It really does just take 1 minute. So please do that before you leave. Don't forget, there are still many more FCI Live sessions to go today and tomorrow, and you can register up to 5 minutes in advance of a session. So please feel free to go to fci.coop to see all of the other upcoming sessions. And as a reminder, all of our sessions will be available for free on our YouTube page starting on Monday. So we encourage you to go see the ones you missed, and also to share with your fellow cooperators so that you all can learn together, and so that you don't have to evangelize anything all that you learned all on your own. Also, Kevin, Vicky, and Kalyla have offered to stay on for a few more minutes. So after we end the recording, if you'd like to stay on for a less formal conversation, you are welcome to for about up to 10 minutes. And then before I wrap up, I just want to give another shout out and thank you to all of our FCI Live sponsors who help make this event possible every year. We are grateful for that. And thank you all again. This was really excellent.
Thank you very much.